Before we get started in our story today, I just want to clarify or help you understand a couple of words. Okay, Caitlin? You help me out with this, okay? What are descendants or offspring? What is it to be a descendant? What does that mean, Caitlin? Okay, that would be ancestors, or the people from a long time ago. What are descendants? Jack. Shh. Okay, so you are your parents' offspring. So what would an offspring be? Children, kids, right, exactly. Good job, Jack. Right. So descendants are your kids. Yep. So my descendants are Macy and Sari. All right, what is a generation, or what are generations? Joseph. Different years of people. Okay, Max? I don't know. Molly? Okay. Listen, when your grandparents, who is a generation, have a child, that would be your mom or dad, and that would be a generation, and then you are a generation. Okay? So it's not just your kids, it's like that one. So generations is your grandparents is a generation, your parents are a generation, and you are a generation. And the next generation would be the ones after you, the ones you have, right? Yeah. So me and Amanda, we created a generation in Sari and Macy, didn't we? Isn't that super cool? Like, so humans can create generations. All right, and last one. What is an inheritance? Annabelle? Annabelle went like this. Ooh, okay. Jack seems to know a lot of these answers. Hang on. Sorry, go to Jack.
Like if your parents do something and then they tell you to do it, and then they tell you to tell it to your kids, and then so basically do something in your family.
So what do you pass down? Stories. What else? Recipes. Oh, this is good. What else do you pass down? Jack. Money. Or property that you own, right? Stuff, right? So that's good. Stories, recipes, money, property, anything you pass down from generation to generation. So Sari and Macy grew up. As they grow up, one of their favorite things, especially when they were younger, is they would ask Amanda and I, tell us stories of what it was like when you were growing up. And so that's one of the things they loved, is we would tell stories. And then the stories become funny because of the weird things Jeremy and Amanda did growing up. Right? How many of you guys, your parents, have really funny stories about when they're growing? How many of you guys have never thought, I should ask my parents about some really funny stories? Yes, you should. So that could be your afternoon activity today. It's like, Mom and Dad, tell me some funny stories of when you were growing up. Oh, trust me. They're funny because your parents did them. Okay, so we're going to do the story today called Covenant. All right, Davin, you guys back there, if you guys are going to talk, I'm going to have to separate you. I'm just going to warn you right now, okay? Don't talk while I'm talking. If I ask a question, you can raise your hand. That goes for everybody else. Raise your hand. If not, then I want you just to listen. So Adam and Eve were in the garden, and when they sinned, God sent them east of the garden. So Adam and Eve were outside of the garden. Which direction? East. Adam and Eve had two kids, Cain and Abel. When Cain killed his brother Abel, God took Cain and sent him which direction? Eli? No. East. So Cain had to go east. This is a weird pattern, isn't it? And then there was a tower that was built. I'm going to tell you this story. The whole world had one language and a common speech, and then moved which direction? East. Why is everybody going east? It's a theme. In the first 12 chapters of the Bible, everybody goes from there to, they go east. 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 Anytime in the Bible that people go east, it's usually a bad sign. So if you see somebody going east in the Bible, you should immediately go, this might not be good. This might not be good. So they moved eastward, found a plain, and how many languages do they have? One language. They said to each other, come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly. They used bricks instead of stone. Now, this time, they had new technology. Stones are rocks. That takes a lot of work to chisel to make the shape you want. So it was really hard to build with stone. Okay? But they had this new technology called a brick, and you could shape a brick. You could bake them to the exact form that you wanted, and guess what you could do with this new technology? You could not only build, but you could build high, because you could now design exactly how you wanted it to go to support the weight. So guess what these guys decided to do? They said, come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens. And here's why they did that. Because we want to make a name for ourselves. And we don't want to be scattered all over the whole earth like God wants us to. What was God's thing he wanted? Micah? Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Did he say be fruitful and hang out in one place? No. But these guys said, we're going to make a name for ourselves. We don't care about God. We're going to do whatever we want. And God goes, The Lord came down to the city in the tower the men were building. The Lord said, if as one people they can speak the same language, they'd be good. There's nothing they plan to do will be impossible. So God is funny. He's like, so come, let us go down and confuse their language so that they won't understand each other. It's like a parent going, like me and Amanda going, okay, what can we do to make our kids frustrated? This is going to be so much fun. So what they did is God came down and they confused their languages. So how many languages were there before this? One. Could they all understand each other? Oh yeah, because they spoke one language. And then when he added more languages, could people understand each other? So if I say Nem Tadom, you guys know exactly what I'm saying by that, right? Yeah. Nem Tadom? Nope, that means I don't know in Hungarian. Huh? So if I start saying words and you're like, I don't understand what you're saying, you would try to find the other person that's saying Nem Tadom, Nem Tadom, Nem Tadom. And so then you would go, oh, I can understand Nem Tadom, Nem Tadom, and you could start talking and you would understand each other. And so what happened was all these humans started finding who they could talk to. And now they couldn't talk to everybody, so guess what happened? They scattered across the face of the earth. And now there's like 10,000 languages. Yeah. So the Lord scattered them all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. That's why it was called Babel. From there, the Lord scattered them over the face of the earth. The stories we've done so far, Adam and Eve to Babel, has been God dealing with the world. From now on, for the rest of the story, all the 21 stories, God's going to narrow his focus to one family. And guess who the one guy he's going to pick to start a family through? Abram, a guy named Abram. So God, it's almost like God is looking, because all the stuff he's done so far, people are just evil. So he's not getting their attention. So he says, I'm going to do a certain plan. And he got a whole plan here. He's like, I'm going to pick one guy, and I'm going to show the whole world what I'm like through this one guy. Yes, Max?
I know the story.
What? Okay, well, listen. So listen and make sure I tell it right when we're done, okay? You make sure I did it right, okay? So he's going to focus on which guy? Abram, exactly. So God says to Abram, leave where you live, your people, your father's house, and go to the land I'll show you. So if I said, Violet, you need to leave your family, and I need you to go live in Australia. Right now. Would you do it? But it's like, So what if a God shows up to this guy Abram and says, hey, leave. Is that weird or normal? Weird, Jack says. Weird, yes. And guess what? He does it. He leaves. And God says, I'm going to make you into a great nation. I'll bless you. He says, I'll make your name great. Who's going to make his name great? God is. Oh, do you remember the story before this? What did the humans try to do? Make a name for themselves. In this story, God's going to make his name great. I'll bless those who bless you. Whoever curses you, I will curse. That means, hey, Abram, I have your back. If anybody does something to you, I'll take care of them for you. You don't have to do it. All the peoples on the earth will be blessed through you. So this one guy, what's his name? Abram. God's going to work his plan of redemption, of saving humans from themselves. Because remember what they did when they followed Adam and Eve? When they followed the serpent, they chose to follow their own way and not whose ways? God's ways. So somehow God is going to use Abram to fix the whole world. How do you think Abram's going to do? Good or bad? Well, let's wait and see what he does. Okay, let's wait. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. So Abram's the father of the Hebrews. He's making a new kind of people who'd show the world what it meant to live in God's ways. So there was a land that he sent him to, a land called Canaan, and God was going to, here's the word, Jack, to your offspring, I will give you this land. So we call it the promised land, the land God promised, okay? But there's a problem. And this is a really interesting problem, and you'll know it exactly when you see it. Abram was about how old do you think? 95. Not 95, 75. How old was his wife Sarai? 65. Now, to this point in their lives, guess what? They're old, and they have had no children. How can God create a family from an old guy and an old woman? Right? Magic, Lucas says. Abram says, "Oh, sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless? I don't have any, and the one who will inherit my estate is this guy, Eliezer." Who's that? We don't know. And Abram said, "You've given me no children, so a servant in my house will be my heir, the one who will get all of my stories, recipes, money, and property." And God says, "I'm going to make a covenant with you. This man will not be your heir, but a son coming from your own body." Wait a second. How old are they? 75 and 65. This is not a problem for God, but for humans, we're like, nah, it's probably not a great idea, right? He took him outside, and he says, "Look up at the heavens." How many of you guys have been outside on a lake in the dark, and you look up and you're like, well, that's some cool stars. See, in Hayward, we have the benefit of not being in a city, and so when we go outside at night and we look up, guess what we see on a regular basis? If it's not cloudy, we see stars. Yeah, those city people, they can't see the stars because there's too much light pollution, right? How many of you guys love looking at the stars? Oh, how many of you guys have ever laid on the ground in the summertime when there's not many bugs and you just stare? And you see shooting stars. How many ever saw a shooting star before? Oh, see? If I was to ask city people, they would be like, what's a shooting star? We've seen them in the movies. All right. Sorry, I forgot to tell you this. If you can count the stars, that's how many kids, offspring you're going to have. Wait a minute. What's Adam and Sarai's? Abram and Sarai's problem? They're old and they don't have any kids. How can they have stars in the sky amount of kids when they don't have even one? Caitlin's like, yeah, that's a big problem. So Abram said, "No, God, I don't believe you. You're wrong. That's stupid." Does he say that? No, he said, the story goes, Abram believed the Lord, and God credited to him as righteousness. So when we believe that what God says is going to happen, that's called faith. Isn't that interesting? So Abram shows us early on what it looks like to have faith. Yes, Joseph? No, his wife is. You said for his own body. I know. Yeah. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, Joseph. All right. Okay. Abraham still has a problem. He's too old, and Sarai doesn't have what? Any children. So they said, well, we're going to take matters into our own hands. We're going to do it instead of letting God do it. So Sarai says, hey, we'll take one of my servants, my servant girls, and Abram, you marry her, and then you can have a kid, because I can't give you any kids. I can't get pregnant. And so Abram goes, okay, that sounds like a good idea. And so him and Hagar get married, and they have a kid named Ishmael. Is that the promised son? No. Oh, no, because who did God say the promised son would come from? Abram and Sarai. Exactly. Sarai began to despise her mistress and mistreated Hagar. So, yes. Okay. Abram got changed to Abra. Yeah, it's so hard for me. Yeah, so when Abram was 90, wait a minute. Okay, sorry, we got to back up. From here to here is 20 years. No, 24 years. Right, am I doing the math? What's 99, and he was 75, so what's 99 minus 75? 24. So he waited 24 years. Abram was 99 years old. The Lord said, hey, come back, let's talk. I'm going to make sure you know that my promise, I'm still going to do my promise. And Abram's like, God, we've been waiting 24 years, and I'm not getting any younger. I'm getting older. He's 24 years older, which means Sarai is 89. Oh my goodness. So God changed his name. Hold on, we're going to get there. God changed his name. He said, as for me, this is my covenant promise with you. You will be the... Wait a minute, has it worked yet? Has it worked yet? Does Abraham still believe God? He's had to wait 24 years. Would you question if you had to wait that? You're not even 24 years old yet, are you? You don't even know what 24 years is like. That's a long time. So he changes Abram's name to Abraham, which means daddy. Dad of many nations. Father of many nations. And Abram's got to be like, God, you keep saying I'm going to have kids. As many as the stars in the sky. You keep saying I'm going to have kids. You rename my name to Abraham. God, I don't have any kids yet. And God's like, don't worry about it, Abraham, don't worry about it. Does Abraham still believe him? What do you think, Luke? Luke's like, yeah, and he does. He still believes it. And then he changes Sarai's name to Sarah, and he says, as for Sarah, your wife, you're no longer to call her Sarai, but it will be Sarah, because she's going to be the mother of nations. How's Sarah doing with having babies so far? Pretty bad. Yeah. She's 89 right now. How's she doing with having babies? No babies. So then they start to laugh. Abram fell face down and said to himself, will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? So he laughs. Sarah also laughs to herself. She says, am I worn out? And my master, this is her husband, is old. Will I now have this pleasure of having a child? So who laughs? Abraham. Who also laughs? Sarah. They think this is the funniest thing in the world, that a 100-year-old guy and a 90-year-old woman are going to have babies. And God says, is anything too hard for me? Oh, yes, Max. Am I saying it right?
But then I thought Abraham married a different girl.
Hagar. Yeah, but not Sarah. Sarah doesn't have any kids yet. Hagar does, but not Sarah. So God says, is anything too hard for the Lord? Do you guys think that? No. Is there anything that's impossible that God can't do? No. Oh, there it is. Abraham and Sarah have a son. The Lord was gracious to Sarah as he had said, remember? And the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and had a son to Abram in his old age at the very time God had promised. Abraham gave the name Isaac. Do you know what the name Isaac means? It means laughter. Is that what you're going to say, Abigail? It means laughter. Everybody ready? 1, 2, 3. What if your name was laughter, and every time you came into somebody's presence, they were like, ha 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 ha? They didn't say your name, they did your name. That would be funny. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son. Abraham was how old? 100 years old. And Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. So what is God doing right now? He zeroed into one family, Abraham, and Sarah, and he said, I'm going to make you a family. And so there's Abraham and Sarah, and what's the son? Isaac. What's their offspring? What's their descendant? Isaac. And now Isaac is going to get married, and they're going to have a son, and then they're going to have, and so this was, we think this was around 4,000 years ago. Okay, maybe 4,500 years ago when this happened. This is a real story. And Abraham is the father of many nations. The Muslims, listen, the Muslims come from Abraham, the Jews come from Abraham, and Christians come from Abraham. Like 3 of the major world religions come from Abraham. So Abraham also was the father of the Edomites and the Moabites and not the Canaanites. So he was like, and the Ishmaelites, he had all kinds of nations that came from. Is he really the father of many nations? He is. Did Abraham think that at the time? Well, he believed God, but it wasn't real until he had a son. Right? So that's a story. That God makes a promise with humans, with Abraham, to show the world what he was like. He wants the Hebrews to be a new kind of people who would show the world what it means to live in God's ways. Remember what we did with God? We said, no, God, we think we can do it better. Even Adam did. They took a bite of the fruit, and they chose to go their own way. Which direction is that? East. And they kept going east and getting worse and worse and worse. And God says, I want you to reverse direction. I want you to turn and walk in my ways. And the humans are like, nah, we'd rather do our own thing, what we would like to do. And so God says, I'm going to work with one family, and I'm going to teach this family what it's like to be my kind of people. And so Abraham is going to be different than everybody else. Do you know which direction Abraham went? West. He went back towards where the garden was. The promised land. And he's back where God wants him to be. And the question is always going to, as we go through all these stories, is going to be, are they going to follow God's ways? Is the Abraham people going to follow God's ways? Or are they going to keep going east and following their own ways instead of going towards God? Let's pray.